Hello, and welcome to another episode of Leader Generation brought to you by ModUp. I'm your host, Tessa Burg, and today I am joined by Liz Holden. She is ModUp's EVP of Experiential and Events. And we're really excited about this conversation because experiential and events is experiencing a dramatic boom that is projected to only continue in 2025, booned by none other than the need to get together physically and the ability for technology and AI to personalize and make the experience more rich for attendees. Liz, thanks so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. So happy to be here.
So you're relatively new to the ModUp family, and this podcast is for our clients. And I don't know if a lot of our clients know, but ModUp is one of the fastest growing and largest independent agencies in the country. And we recently acquired the agency that you led. And we were so excited. Like it had been in the works for a year, thinking about like who's going to be this right fit that's going to help us really bring best of market services to events and experiential. So tell us a little bit about yourself, where your agency started and your new role now at ModUp.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been working in events in some way, shape, or form for pretty much my entire career, and a lot of different types of events, everything from music festivals and large scale endurance-based athletic fundraisers to huge galas to private events to experiential marketing, and most recently with image media, more corporate, strategically driven, business events. And so it's been really interesting through that trajectory to see how technology has both evolved during that time and also, really changed the way that we experience not just events, but the industries that those are existing within. And I, in particular, think back to my very first job out of college was in the music industry. And I'm going to date myself here because it was at the dawn of Napster. And everybody was in a tizzy and, Tower Records had just closed and the music industry was dead and no one was ever going to make music again. And it was going to be a disaster. And it was a really interesting time to kind of be in that space. And obviously now we look back and see that was 100% not true. And in fact, the music industry has flourished and everybody has their Spotify account. And it's really, I think what we're seeing now with AI is like another interesting kind of turning point in a very similar way. And it's really exciting to be exploring like what are the ways that can come into play to elevate not just the events that we're producing, but also driving the businesses that we're serving.
I love that comparison because that had to have been a scary time. I mean, I will say I was on the other end where I was just like a Napster super user. I'm like, this is amazing.
Oh, we all were. We 100%. I mean,
yeah. And it's funny when you're only in the consumer seat, you have zero sort of visibility into the disruption it's having in industry. But even now, when we're in the industry of marketing that's being impacted by AI, we have to take ourselves out and put ourselves in the attendee, in the customer consumer seat to really appreciate the what's possible and what's going to be next for marketing in general, but especially. Yeah. So I told you before we got on the call, I was just doing some research to try and quantify like where this growth in events is coming from. And it's really significant. I tested 3 different tools to get this research, but according to Bizaboo's report pulled by Perplexity, the number of events grew by 52% in 2024. And large organizations of 1,000 to 2,499 employees hosted an average of 11 events, which was a 112% increase. We also saw a lot more brands starting to show up physically in spaces doing activations that were not necessarily tied to just selling a product. And this phenomenon, I mean, it's just like a hockey stick up in people wanting to host events. What business objectives were driving this growth? And it's not just, 2023 to 2024. This trend started actually in the pandemic. People started experimenting with virtual, and it just kept going. And now with pandemic and restrictions lifted, they must have been finding successes. So tell us a little bit about what's been driving this growth.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so it's interesting that you mentioned the pandemic because I do think that is actually was such a crucible of a moment for our industry. And I had a pretty unique perspective actually because I joined Image Media in March of 2020. Like as the events industry was like, so I have apparently I have a pattern. I start
Oh my God.
anyhow, it was a really interesting moment in that Image Media, in addition to having that focus on B2B and corporate events, has a really strong kind of background also in video and broadcast, interactive technologies. So it was like, I said at the time, I was like, this is, I either have the best timing or the worst timing, and only time will tell. And it turned out to be the best timing. And we were really uniquely positioned to rise to that moment and create a lot of really interesting, dynamic type of online experiences for our clients that were helping them achieve real business objectives during that time. And actually, what you saw with events in that pandemic is, a lot of the private events fell away, a lot of the fun stuff, but what persisted and what actually grew and what we saw was the business events. Like the business still needed to get done. You had people scattered all over needing to still drive business forward and connect and communicate and all the things that events are meant to do, which is create alignment, inform, inspire, change the way your people are thinking, what they're doing, how they're feeling, and kind of creating that moment to bring people together. So certainly during the pandemic, that was enabled by technology and all the really interesting, the boom that was necessitated in some of those event technologies. And you just saw this explosion and like rapid acceleration of some of those technologies. And more importantly, like an adoption of it and a realization of like the value of that. Also, it's interesting you say that the statistics are showing the increase in events. Part of me wonders if that's also a factor of increased measurement, because measurement has always been a real challenge in events. Um, it's intangible, it's in person. And before technology was woven into events in the way that it is so much more now, there wasn't necessarily, like, no one was counting, Once you took everybody online and you put them in these platforms and you're counting the data and you're measuring it, like it's a lot easier to track that. And you're seeing like there aren't events that happen without that element for the most part now, right? So yeah, it was a really time of tremendous growth, and we saw that happening in the virtual space. And then as we started coming out of the pandemic, what you saw is many workforces were still distributed. You really needed to, like, the culture of organizations had changed, right? And you needed to be bringing people back together. There was this like tremendous hunger for people to be like back in the room, back in that like visceral in-person interaction. And so it came back with like a vengeance.
Yeah.
And there were elements of, and we talked about this a lot during the transition period of like, let's not throw the baby out with bathwater, because there were a lot of things, strategies and techniques and technologies that were developed during the pandemic that are still like super relevant and useful. And we can carry that forward into this live and hybrid kind of world that we're in now.
Yeah. And that's why you and I are becoming best friends.
True. It's
In
true.
in parallel, our agency during the pandemic built a platform to help facilitate distributed training and sales. And it's interesting that our platform, which now we call the Enterprise Transformation Platform, did not die, but in fact has now gone on to have a life of its own, because the need to provide a service where people can get a more personalized experience from a
Mhm.
mass event before and after the event is still there. And it was funny because I hadn't made that connection at the time, but it's that simple truth of you're sitting at a corporate event, a leader is presenting, the information is usually awesome and inspirational, but you're like taking notes rapidly. And then when you get to the office, you're busy again. And what, one element of the platform allows you to do is ask questions, see what else is out there, pull some slides really quickly. It's really bringing the events, the value of the events to pre and post and measurement. Like I've always enjoyed showing clients the impact that it's having on their staff and those continuous feedback loops that can inform the next event. And what I've seen, I don't know if you've seen this too, but then it starts leading to more webinars, like leading to more virtual ways to engage, to keep the conversation going in manners that don't require as much time or travel. Is that something that you've seen clients like take advantage of as they begin to operationalize and really act on the data?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're at kind of the nascent stages of that really coming to life in a real way. I would say second to the holy grail of measurement and ROI in events, the second holy grail has been that like the stickiness, the ongoing engagement. Like how do you keep that learning and engagement happening out in the real world, which is where you need it to be having the impact, right? And so historically the tools for that have been more like, there'll be a summary and a kind of a flow down packet that goes out, and there's maybe some recaps and a video, or the PowerPoint decks are sent along. But
Yeah.
it's the administrative and mental load of processing that for someone once they get back into their like everyday life. It's like for most people not realistic. It's not actionable. So when we're thinking about this is what I'm super excited about with the ETP, and I know we're working really closely together, our teams, to kind of further evolve and refine that, is like, how do you take that friction out of the experience in the actual event so that there's no barrier to engagement? You're making it as easy as humanly possible. You're letting guests actually be there in the moment, focused on the content, the people, the conversations, and all of that, the note taking and the where am I going and what am I doing and who should I talk to? And am I just going to like randomly bump into the right person at the cocktail party and have the right conversation? That all of that can be enabled with some of these AI technologies that then packages that up, makes those insights actionable, and helps you, it carries it for you back into your day-to-day life. And again, kind of just removes that friction and makes it's the same way we think about all AI, right? It's the automation of repetitive tasks. So how do you take away all of that junk so you can focus on the higher value thinking and conversations and doing and connecting, which is really what events are all about.
Yeah, I agree. I think of it as like you have like an assistant right with you. And you can kind of keep it in your pocket so people don't know that you forgot where you're supposed to go next or who the crap is this person I'm talking to. Um,
Totally. And it's no different than what we're already doing in our, I mean, who isn't talking to Siri or Alexa day in and day out, right? Like we're already doing it. We don't think about it because it's now so just like endemic to how we live our daily lives, but we're on the cusp of seeing that come to life within the context of events. And it's something I know, Karamata, that was a big driver for us, is like the excitement of being able to be a part of shaping that and driving it forward.
yeah. And there's a lot of other really cool technology that's emerging, that's coming in to making that event even more sticky that we can connect to. And I just wanted to give some airtime to that
Yeah.
because I I think events now are also much more enjoyable because they are more interactive. It's not just go in, sit down. Like there's a real cool factor with
Hmm.
screens with AR and VR, wearable devices. I think hologram technology seemed like super weird, and now that it's accessible and
Cool.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
very cool. So tell me about what are some of, outside of AI, what are some of the other technologies happening in that event space that are driving more engagement and more of really the entertainment factor at the event?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think, first of all, one like guiding principle for me and for us at Image Media has always been like, you don't want to have technology just for the sake of technology. Like it shouldn't be a party trick. Like it should be something that is purposeful, that is enhancing the guest experience, that has like a purpose for being there. So always still we're going back to before we had any technology and we're starting from the place of like, what is it we're trying to accomplish with this event? What is the experience we want the guests to be having? What do we want them to walk away doing, thinking, feeling? And then you build that technology and that environment and that experience around that, and you kind of put all those pieces together. So when we think about that and how that drives engagement, I think there are a lot of technologies that are either removing friction again from the experience. So you think about there's a lot of like super interesting, even silly. Again, I take the example of like these things are already in our lives, right? So you can, everybody has their air tags, right? You're probably putting in your luggage or your kid, where they are. So those air, that same technology, motion tracking, can be used in a lot of super interesting ways, either from the attendee perspective of, they're walking through a space and there's AR overlays coming into play that are able to kind of take them deeper into whatever that learning environment is and whatever they're experiencing. Those same RFID tags or tags, right, can go in a speaker's pocket, for example, on stage. And you can have motion track cameras that are autonomous, that are able to track that movement. And that has all sorts of implications, both from like a cost effectiveness standpoint, but also from a production value standpoint. And more importantly, from like the speaker comfort level. Like they can move more naturally, they can walk around, they don't have to worry about being in the right place, they don't have to sit there for all of the special blocking and the whatever. It's all happening autonomously. And those are little things that do make a difference in the way that presentation comes across. Um, we're looking a lot at these immersive technologies as well. So there's, spatial LED, isn't it super interesting? That's like, if you think about what would it be like to be in a 3D holographic environment, but you don't need the goggles and you don't need the things, and you can be in that AR environment and immersed in it naturally and moving around and seeing that around you with others and experiencing it together also is super interesting. And you're seeing that happen a lot actually in the world of entertainment and music. So you see on music tours where they have the kind of budgets that can support the development of that and kind of rely on that visual. But when you think about taking that and applying those things that are happening out in the world of culture, music, et cetera, to an event, you can bring those same technologies and use them again in service of a more strategic objective, right? You put a little more substance into it. We also think about some of the sensory technologies that are out there. So again, really thinking about kind of the whole environment and how people are experiencing that. There's a lot of really cool, interesting things you can do with that. We've joking, we haven't done this yet, but I think we should. Even like haptic seating, right? So like, people fall asleep a little bit in that. In some presentations, it get a little boring. So in the old days, we used to turn the temperature way down in the ballroom to keep everybody awake, right? But what if there was like sensory input happening this part of the presentation and you're feeling that and it's helping you engage with the environment and information. And that you also see, I mean, you see that like even at like Disney World, right? They've done it forever. They do it the best, where you really when you think about those more consumer facing experiences where you're trying to connect with brands and create an impression, like all of those are kind of touch points and tools that we can be using that are super interesting.
Yeah, and I think you said with AR and VR experiences like music and entertainment are really leaning into that. I feel like they're always leading, but where the technology is right now, and yes, it's still an investment, like B2B companies have a massive opportunity to really bring their more technical products to life in a different way. Like
Yeah.
one of my favorite parts about working on B2B clients is hearing directly during the stakeholder calls with the engineers and hearing the origin story of how they got there. And it's
Yeah.
not about like, corporate events, maybe they could talk about IP, but it's more, this allows you to get up close and personal to, how different gears actually affect the heat within a big piece of machinery,
Yep.
introduce new technology monitoring, where does that data go? How is it used? Like I think about like, John Deere is basically a data company now and all the amazing and cool applications that come out of that. And we have a number of manufacturing clients that make all sorts of small but critical components and widgets. And it's like you can get right up in there. And if you are doing that with your sales team and giving them that
Totally.
experience that's like totally unlike sitting there and doing a training, I just think that could be, unreal. And
Absolutely. And I mean, we've talked about it. We do a lot of work in the, med tech space, for example, and even like, how amazing would it be to have, a live surgery that is being broadcast that has annotation overlaid. So you're seeing exactly, I mean, has so many implications, both from a training perspective for the actual surgeons themselves, for example, or the sales teams or a broader, there's just it's very, very cool. It allows you to get in there and observe and interact with information in a way that is just so much deeper than what, even if you were there in person, you wouldn't have that, right?
right. And then when you pair that with the AI, you now can facilitate everyone asking questions while that's going on at the same time to their own personal assistant. And
Exactly.
we were saying before, we think voice is highly underutilized. Like there's an opportunity,
Absolutely.
for brands to really have real conversations with the attendees in real time. And I think that sometimes when I go to an event, I don't talk to the speaker because I have to go to the next thing or because
Hmm.
the line for them. And with AI, I can talk-ish to the speaker, but
Yes.
what amazing feedback for the company to look at the questions that were asked, for the speaker to look what was happening. And also it turns into something that can power your own ownable models that you can start to optimize your events against. And it becomes a very personal way for brands to continue to grow and differentiate from other brands, because no one brand, to your point, when you go into the event, it's all about that brand. It's all about their objectives. You're not just doing the same thing everywhere.
Yeah.
And that I just feel like events and physical spaces and having that optimization and data all in one spot can just be so powerful to really elevate, that entire brand experience in a really productive and growth oriented way.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting you mentioned that with voice and to be able to engage with the speaker. But even I was talking with a client yesterday about, the surveys. Again, coming back to the holy grail of metrics and ROI. So big, surveys are something that is used pretty universally. Like most events have something they send out to attendees. The response rate tends to be pretty low. Like it's the barrier. It's like you're back, it's a thing. I have to log in and then I have to type and then I have to do the thing and I have to think about it. And people don't do it, or you get the people that do feel really, really strongly. And maybe that skews the results a little bit. You're not getting a true sample of what the whole audience experience was. And so, we were talking about like what voice could be a really powerful tool there. Like, what if it's something that's activated as you walk out of the session and you can just speak your feedback right into the phone while it's fresh in your head, while you're in the moment, while you're, able to provide that feedback in a much more immediate way when you remove that barrier to that interaction and the transfer of information.
Yeah, I think that the metrics and those ties are just so powerful. Oh man, Liz, we only have one more minute. So this has been an awesome conversation. I feel like we're going to have to record another episode. So for listeners, there will be more because we still need to get into how consumer brands can make the most of these technologies and truly scale like physical events for themselves and get closer to their customers and personify and bring their brand to life. So we're going to save that for another
Absolutely.
episode. But for right now, if people want to get in touch with you, learn more about ModOps, Experiential, and Events Strategic Business Unit, where can they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So LinkedIn is great. So Liz A. Holden, I believe it is. And poor Liz Holden with no A is getting all sorts of strange messages.
Oh, how funny. I love it.
She also runs marathons because I see her little stats and she's much faster than me.
Yeah. When my maiden name is Tessa Frazier, and there was a Tessa Frazier who did gymnastics and track, and she was better at me than everything. I'm like, gosh darn it, other Tessa.
Right? I know. I want to meet her someday.
Ah. But I want to thank you so much for being a guest today. We're definitely going to talk to you again. This is a massive topic. And if you want to hear more episodes of Leader Generation, you can find them on modop.com. That's modop.com. We'll have the transcript. There's so much deep information in this episode, and you can hear from other thought leaders uh, in and around the Modop community. And until next time, thanks.
Thank you.